we believe in the new world of agentic AI, they can build whatever dashboard that they want. Just type in a prompt and say, hey, I want to build a view that shows me this, this, and this. And agentic AI goes out and figures that out for you in real time, right? That is the power of what, AI is going to bring to us across all aspects of business over the next 5 years.
Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Vijay Sankaran. Vijay is the Chief Digital and Information Officer of Johnson Controls, a leader in smart, healthy, and sustainable buildings that earns in excess of $23 billion in annual revenue. Vijay has had his current role for about 6 months, and he's been with the company for a bit more than 4 years, having previously served as the Chief Technology Officer and Head of Digital Solutions. As his role is aggrandized, so is his influence across the company, a company that's innovations increasingly center around digital and AI-driven solutions. I look forward to hearing more about all that he's helped seed through this conversation. Vijay is also a board member at Veralto, a company that develops technology solutions to provide access to clean water and safe food. He's a former CIO of TD Ameritrade as well. Vijay, welcome back to Technovation. It's great to speak with you today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Peter. It's great to see you and be a part of Technovation again.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. I'm so grateful for it. I thought we'd begin, if you don't mind, Vijay, with a bit about your company, what a storied history it has dating back to 1885. This is the 140th year of the company, and would love to understand the current state of it. Talk a bit about Johnson Controls, if you would.
Absolutely. Well, I actually found out recently it's older than that because one of the companies that we've acquired is older than 140 years old. So I don't know. Somebody said it was like 200 years or something
Goodness.
like that. But still, quite a storied history. And I mean, at the end of the day, the company has gone through a lot of different evolutions and acquisitions and divestitures, throughout the year. But at the end of the day, it's really all focused around buildings and, how do we support commercial buildings globally, whether that's through our industrial products, which include our award-winning HVAC portfolio or our fire and security solutions, then underpinned by digital capabilities with our Open Blue platform on top of that to really bring out the smart buildings in the buildings themselves, and then supported by a world-class global field services team and a number of different channel partners. So if you think about that, our focus is all about making buildings smarter, more efficient, really providing innovative solutions, both industrial and technological, for the millions of buildings that exist worldwide.
A great overview, Vijay. Thank you so much for it. Take a moment, if you would, to provide a brief overview of your role as Chief Digital and Information Officer as well, if you would.
Yeah, and so I mean, this is a great role in the sense that, prior to January, I had all of the digital solutions, which would include our Open Blue and connected services portfolios, as well as software engineering for our products across the firm. And after the turn of the year, we looked at our entire set of responsibilities as a leadership team, holistically, and it made sense for me to take on a role that was really all about digitizing, Johnson Controls, and whether that's digitization as it relates to our customers, digitization as it relates to our internal employees, and field service personnel, as well as factory workers, all leveraging data, AI, software solutions. And so, as part of that, I took on a new responsibility, which is the Chief Digital and Information Officer, which includes, what I had previously around the Open Blue digital software as a service portfolio, and connected services fulfillment, and then added to that responsibility AI, data, as well as all of the IT transformation efforts that are underway. And now it's really a one-stop shop for digital across the entire enterprise at Johnson Controls.
Well, let's talk about your older set of responsibilities, if you wouldn't mind, before we get into some of the newer ones. I'd love to hear more in your own words about the open blue as well as the connected services. Talk a bit further about that. That's something again you've led for some time, has already demonstrated remarkable progress. Give a brief overview and sort of the state of those, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of, evolution over the last 3 years. I mean, when I first took that over back in 2021, it was, I would say, a not very well developed, set of capabilities that were not integrated. The data was all disparate. We were doing a lot of what I would call one of a kind type of projects for individual customers. And, over the last 3 years, what I'm most proud of is we've built, a platform of capabilities. We've done three acquisitions, through that time, including the latest one, which we did was FM Systems, which is a intelligent workplace management solution. And then, adding on top of that, the ability to bring together, all of the open blue solutions under one umbrella. And now having distinct value propositions for our customers around energy optimization, being able to have sustainability compliance, equipment performance optimization, as well as understanding, how people are utilizing and can optimize the space with our intelligent workplace solutions. And now we've, entered into a couple of additional vectors, vertical vectors around healthcare optimization and operating rooms, worker safety solutions. And so, we are really expanding our portfolio of digital capabilities, to support a different and a wide variety of personas, and really how we can deliver value to each of those, leveraging digital and data inside the buildings.
It's remarkable, and it speaks to the broader area of expertise of smart, healthy, and sustainable buildings. I wonder if you could take a moment, Vijay, and take each of those three categories and talk about the smart. They sort of make sense, although I'm sure there's a good brief overview you can provide as to some of the critical aspects of that. The healthy and sustainable, I'd also be interested in what are the digital implications of that? What do you and your team get involved in innovating around ensuring that progress continues to be made in those categories as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as it relates to the smart, if you think about, the history of building systems, right? I mean, each of these systems, whether it's HVAC and controls, fire, security, they are all very stovepipe. So when the HVAC guys were putting in, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, they would think about that. The controls guys were putting in, control systems to control the heating, ventilation, air conditioning. So those two aspects have always sort of had some correlation. But then the fire is a completely independent solution. Security is a completely independent solution. And then there's a whole bunch of point sensors that people are measuring stuff around, right? Now, just like in every other industry that we've been a part of, whether that was in CRM or whether it's in factory automation or whether it's in anything that has had, a process-centric digitization. In the building sector, people look at the building now and all of the processes around buildings management, whether that's, where I'm going to invest in the building, how I'm going to manage the space, how I'm going to install my equipment, how do I track the equipment inside the buildings, how is that equipment actually functioning, how much it actually costs me. You can think of what people want today as more as kind of an ERP or a Salesforce for buildings. And so that's really where the genesis of smart buildings emerges from, in the sense that you're bringing all this data together in one platform, and then you're unlocking new value capabilities based upon that data all being brought together. So it has moved from sort of a stovepipe, equipment centric or functional centric view to a much more holistic value stream centric view. And so by doing that, you're unlocking so much more value for different, personas who occupy or utilize or manage buildings. And so that's the smart. As part of that, healthy is what, employees really are, or occupants are demanding in when they work in a lot of these facilities, especially in other parts of the world outside of the United States, where, if there's high humidity in a facility, or there is, different kinds of odor inside of a facility, or there's a whole set of different sensors that can be put in to really understand it. Now, the HVAC system inside of a facility has a huge impact in terms of the healthy. And there's also a number of studies that have been done when air quality is better inside of a building, whether it's through removing particulates or increasing the blowers, productivity of employees gets higher. And so, you can remember that feeling when you go to a really nice hotel where the air is so crisp, like the Four Seasons or something like that, or you're at the older property down the street where it feels, a little bit musty, right? What you're feeling like, and so the thesis behind healthy buildings is exactly the same, and using digital sensors and using that to optimize it, the HVAC inside of different spaces, even in near real time, you're able to make people more productive by, having them feel like they're at their healthiest inside of the space that they're occupying. And then finally, there is sustainable, right? And the definition of sustainable, continues to evolve, in current times. But at the root of it, there's always been a very direct correlation between sustainability and energy efficiency. And so, at its core, sustainability is about making buildings more energy efficient in our space, and how do we basically optimize the building so that the equipment is being utilized appropriately. We are looking at external weather patterns, and so in addition to that, in many parts of the world, or many reporting type of requirements, CSRP as an example, in Europe, where there's sustainability requirements around how different scope emissions are being consumed or output from different building types and things like that. And so, by measuring the energy that is being produced by equipment inside the building, as well as, understanding through utilities bills, what the upstream, sources of that energy are, you can, really connect the dots and be able to show what your different emission types are, scope one, scope two. And then by the actions that you're taking, how do you actually begin to drive down some of those emissions and begin to comply with whatever regulations may exist on a global basis? And so that's also a really important part of everything that we do, is that, given our global customer base, and the need to save energy everywhere, being able to track and manage, energy efficiency, and thereby impacting, your scope one and scope two emissions. So if you unpack each of those three, dimensions, digital plays a huge role in understanding what is going on a day-to-day basis, and then being able to offer recommendations, and then ultimately driving autonomous actions to actually optimize those areas of the building in real time.
A great overview, Vijay. Thank you. And needless to say, the understanding you're referring to, there's a lot of data behind that provides it. And I know that your team has made great leaps in terms of leveraging machine learning, artificial intelligence, now expansion into generative artificial intelligence and the like. Talk a bit about the way in which you're using AI to make all that you've just described that much more powerful.
Absolutely. I mean, we believe that, AI, both generative and more traditional machine learning AI, and now agentic AI, is really going to transform the way that buildings operate and humans operate. And so, it needs to be at the center of everything that we're doing to drive efficiencies. And as it relates to inside of the building, for many years, we have been pioneers in terms of detecting faults inside of building, predicting failures, on different equipment types, being able to utilize different algorithms to recommend optimizations on how the HVAC settings can be adjusted in order to basically sense and respond to external temperatures or other sensor data and things like that. And so, we've always like referred to that as sort of, really leading with some level of autonomy where we can make recommendations on how to optimize the buildings. And so, traditional machine learning, deep learning models have always been a part of, predicting, forecasting, recommending, optimizing as part of our OpenBlue platform. Now, what's now taken that to the next level is generative AI, where, in terms of fixing stuff inside of the buildings, being able to understand what fault codes are saying, being able to actually write narratives to our customers around what's going on inside of the building. Generative has sort of taken that to the next level, because not only now can we say, hey, all these fault codes occurred in the building, or produce a graph that shows that this is what your energy was, being consumed. Now we can put a little narrative together, or we can, send a quick, text to a customer that basically says, here's what's going on in your building, here are some recommendations, right? And then if there's a fault in the building, what is that fault actually telling you? So now, through using all of this, fantastic, information that's been developed over the years about equipment and their faults and their makes and models, and coupling the prediction with the generative AI, we're actually taking AI to a whole new level within OpenBlue. And now the next thing is actually taking A plus B, adding C, which is, agentic work streams, and then actually being able to, be more representative of personas who operate different aspects of the building, right? And being able to create a workflow much more end to end that assembles using the outputs of different AI algorithms and different analytics, a recommended approach on how to drive optimal building performance. And so that's the next phase of everything we're thinking about, from, a digital software platform leveraging now agentic AI, to drive the agenda. Because if you think about it, in the future world, we've been focused for so many years, and you've been in the space, Peter, for many years. Everything has been reactive, in the sense that we log into a dashboard, we see a bunch of charts on it, we click on a bunch of things, right? But how about being proactive, right? So you look at the new, world of Chat GPT. You go into Chat GPT and you ask a question. It's more an on-demand kind of a world, right? You're not expecting to see a pre-built dashboard, right? And so, what we've seen with our customers over the years is a lot of them are like, oh, I want to see this view, I want to see that view, I want to see this other view. And so there's a team actually in the background that has to build out a dashboard, present a new view. We believe in the new world of agentic AI, they can build whatever dashboard that they want. Just put in, just type in a prompt and say, hey, I want to build a view that shows me this, this, and this. And by the way, which months had the anomalies and why did they have the anomalies? And agentic AI goes out and figures that out for you in real time, right? That is the power of what, AI is going to bring to us across all aspects of business over the next 5 years.
A compelling vision, certainly, Vijay. Thank you for that great explanation. It also occurs to me, and you and I have spoken a bit about this in the past as well. Yours is a company that operates in buildings also, and so you are users of all you're describing, in addition to being a provider of what you're describing. And can you talk a bit about some of the advantages and lessons that you draw from your own experience within the company that impacts then the customer experience by extension?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really, astute observation. And what I would say is that, in this space that we're in, and let's take chillers, which is, our most valuable, product in the sense that it provides the most value from a physical sense in terms of comfort for our customers. And right now, with the data center boom that's going on, it is in such high demand, right? Now, and these are very expensive assets, data centers can order hundreds of them at a time to, cool these massive data centers. And when they go down or when they have an issue or, when there's, suboptimized, you can either A, cost a lot of money, B, can be a big headache because, when one goes down, you may have to bring some of your services offline and things like that, or C, it's just that you have no visibility into when something is going to go down. And so leveraging digitization in the context of, our own equipment that we're putting in buildings, we have so much more visibility and the ability to be proactive, in terms of just the vision and the foresight to be able to say, hey, to, a large healthcare provider or a large data center provider, we see that this, chiller is showing signs of distress. Let's, preventatively, take an action to get it offline at a low usage hour in the middle of the night. We'll have a technician come in with the necessary part proactively and make that replacement. That's virtuous for us and our customers. For our customers, it's, not disruptive. And for us, it's being ahead of the game. If we're just in an unconnected world, in an undigitized world, I mean, there is no, differentiator other than the quality of our service technicians, versus the 300 other service providers who could, come in the middle of the night if a chiller went down, and, they'll more likely be upset at Johnson Controls because it was one of their chillers that went down, right? And won't call them, right? So, in that sense, it is not only a tool to help the customer, but it's also a tool to kind of drive the relationship improvement between Johnson Control and its customers, just based upon the stickiness that drives value at both ends of the value chain. That can only be done through digitization.
Yeah, powerful examples across the board there. I really appreciate you sharing those. I'm also curious, Vijay, as somebody who has reason to collect so much data on the buildings that the buildings that you have as part of your portfolio. What conclusions are you drawing about where work is done these days? You and I have had an interesting set of off the record and on the record conversations about the evolution of where work is done. It certainly seems as though a lot more work is being done back in, headquarters and office buildings than certainly like three or 4 years ago, but even more so than 18 months ago, let's say. And I wonder if that's validated through the data that you see as well, and what conclusions you're drawing from that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there is more of a trend for, people to be working back in a physical, corporate facility. We have, as part of our FM systems portfolio that we acquired, a lot of sensors around space utilization. A lot of companies are asking for infrared, sensors underneath desks, to basically know when people are working from desks and things of that nature. And so, we do see an increase in office utilization. But I would say to make a generic statement like, hey, there are generally more people coming back every single day to work, I think the data doesn't necessarily, show that, right? I think there are certain companies where there's been more of a top-down focus around coming back into corporate workplaces 3 or 4 days a week. And then there are others where there still hasn't been. And I think part of it is that it depends on the type of company. I think companies that have very strong centralized kind of corporate cultures, think like financial services companies, for example, we have seen the data has shown more, you know, uh, in the office 3, 4 days a week. I think that companies where there is a large centralized presence in a given geographical locale, we've seen more, more focus on having people back in the physical facility to drive collaboration and, social proximity and things like that. I think other organizations are far more distributed, because of they're more acquisitive organizations. They have footprints, all over. I think the data would show in those organizations that are generally more distributed because of acquisitions or their field-based organizations, you know, um, there the the number of people that return to a central office, is is still less than what one would think by reading the more of the use cases that ask people to come back in the office, a certain number of days per week. So I would say it's still a mixed bag. And to be perfectly honest with you, Peter, I mean, I think that's kind of the future of work in some ways, is it's we're going to live in this kind of flux hybrid world, right? And the reason is because a lot of people are on early morning meetings. A lot of people have reorganized their lives around different situations, and there are other challenges that society is facing. So I do think that there are going to be some companies that are very direct about what they expect from their employees and will measure it and make the investments around it. And then others are going to be a little bit more laissez-faire and they feel like they can get the outcomes, and I think it's going to be very, industry contextual as well, right? I recently visited a customer where they have a beautiful 1,500 seat facility, and there was literally 50 people in the facility on a Tuesday. You could play paintball, putt golf balls, throw around a football inside the facility, and you wouldn't come anywhere close to hitting anybody, right? And it was a white collar type of working environment for a company that is in a health related industry, servicing customers, and there would be a strong benefit in terms of everybody being back in the space, but there was no focus that was made by leadership, and there was a concern that people would leave if they did make that a focus. So it's definitely interesting, I think, to see the way that the world is evolving, and I'm sure there will be even more chapters written about this, over the next 5 years. So,
No doubt. But thank you for sharing your perspective.
but it does from a business perspective, it creates opportunities for us because the workplace certainly has become a lot more dynamic than it was previously.
Yeah, great points all. Thank you for sharing that. I mentioned at the outset that you're a board member of Veralto, and I wanted to ask you about your pathway to gaining board membership. You're part of a still fairly exclusive club of tech and digital leaders, thankfully growing, but drips and drabs. Talk a bit about your pathway towards gaining board membership, if you would, Vijay.
I had the desire to become a public board member, probably as early as 2021, 2022, and I always felt like, given the experiences that I've had with leadership, with business, with technology, with data analytics, AI, risk management, that uh, my skills could add value to a leadership team, and so I was pursuing that opportunity. And there were some that the timeline didn't work because, as you know, I'm still a fully employed officer of a Fortune 500 company. And, so I was still early in my tenure when a couple of opportunities emerged. And then there were a couple of opportunities where they decided to go in a different direction. And then, the stars all aligned with Veralto, and it's an absolutely wonderful board that I've had the opportunity to join just because of the value I feel I can add, and what the company's purpose and mission is, which is all around water and food, on a global basis to areas in addition to what I'm doing at JCI that resonates deeply with, my core values. And it's a really well-run company, which is a spin-off of Danaher Corporation. I would say it's just like anything else. It's like whether you're applying for a job or whether you're, applying to colleges or whether you're applying to anything, it's just, meeting with people, really articulating the value proposition, you know, continuing to sharpen your storyline around why you'd be a good addition to their board. I mean, I learned a lot around my first few attempts and feedback that I got, whether it was I was, too high level or too into the weeds or not enough connecting enough the business. So I actually like took all of that input and then, as I went into each subsequent board opportunities, I would almost, craft a narrative, craft an approach, that I felt made me a better candidate, to create that right match between those that were looking for a board member and my background and skill set. I think, for me, having that P&L experience, as a digital business leader, having experience across multiple different industries, being a C-level leader multiple times. I think those are all things that, perhaps made me a little bit more appealing. I've been, exposed to the risk committee. I've been exposed to different cyber incidents. I mean, I've been doing that for many, many years. And I think, coupling all of those things together, I think helped me, become a little bit more appealing maybe than others that are being considered for those opportunities. And so I would say, for CIOs, CTOs, CDIOs, CDOs that are looking for those things, it's all about, I think, expanding your experiential set such that you're not just like the tech person on the board, but you're much more holistic in terms of the experiences that you had. Like, I mean, Veralto acquired a software company last year, and it was just after I had gotten onto the board. And that is something that I had just gone through, 3 times with Johnson Controls. And so, having gone through an M&A, being able to articulate and communicate with other board members about valuations and why software is important and how this is going to add value to their business. I mean, that was a unique perspective that, I brought to the table that a lot of other CIOs don't have. And I think, that made me all that more appealing, for that board opportunity.
Great examples. Thank you so much for sharing, Vijay. Congratulations on getting to accomplishing that goal of yours that you so clearly stated. I wanted to ask you, as somebody who has led research and development, clearly has an innovation mandate, as you look to the future, are there other trends that excite you that are starting to make their way onto your roadmap? What are some of the things that you're beginning to investigate or that are
Well,
exciting?
I mean, I'll tell you, I mean, AI is certainly, 2 or 3 full-time jobs right now at this point, and then some, just given the pace of change that is going on. But what I would say, what's super exciting for me beyond that horizon is quantum computing. And I was at a forum, the Digital 50, which I participate in. You may have heard of that forum, where there's a number of chief digital officers that participate. And we had the head of research from JP Morgan Chase speak to us about everything that they're doing. And they've actually they have a quantum computer that, they've provisioned to basically begin to do quantitative modeling and things like that. And, just like, generative AI, when it was first, introduced, Chat GPT 2.0, 2.5, and it was still like, you could make these like crazy little sonnets and things like that. And then now here we are 3 years later and it's, changing everything. And, I think what I've learned about technology is everything is about time scale. And, some things happen faster than you think, some things happen slower than you think like, autonomous cars, for example. I mean, I think people thought autonomous cars would be here a lot faster than they actually have been, but they're here now. But quantum is one of those things I would say in the 5 to 7 year horizon will become a reality. The point at which we can get to 1,000 qubits on a quantum computer is exciting. And once that happens and you get into a different computing paradigm where it's not single state binary calculations, but it's multi-state, physics-based calculations. I mean, it's game changing in terms of, the level and complexity and, interconnections, almost brain-like function that gets created from a computing platform. And you're going to see, just amazing things evolve from that as well, and unpredictable things evolve from that as well. And so, what's exciting and scary for me to think about is when the world intersects AI and quantum together, in the 2035 timeframe, like what does that do to society, right? And I think it's going to be, I think people should really begin to think about a quantum world and what does that mean, because I think there's other things like, I always believe in technology, like one thing leads to another, like fusion, nuclear fusion and calculations around that, advances in biocomputing and genetics and, simulations that leads to that. I mean, financial modeling and calculations, predicting markets. When you put all of these things together, like kind of like a melting pot, extremely profound things will occur that we can't even begin to fathom right now. So,
yeah, great points. Thank you so much for sharing those reflections as well, Vijay. Before I let you go, anything that you have recently read, watched, and or listened to that you would recommend to others?
well, I just told somebody about this book that I read, which is called The Coming Wave, by Mustafa Suleyman, who is the chief AI officer at Microsoft. He wasn't the chief AI officer when he wrote that book, but he is one of the pioneers on deep learning AI, and just an extremely profound thinker. And a lot of what he's thinking about in the book and talking about is just these transitions of technology that are going to occur. And what I love about the book, is that I'm also I like to think and imagine the way that the world is going to evolve and prepare for that future. And I think that the observations that are made in the book about how different technology platforms converge to create a different sort of society in the future is spot on. And I think what's important for people to understand is, and I use this analogy, is I tell my kids this all the time, is either surf the AI waves and crest on top of it, learn how to ride it, use it, harness it, do everything with it, and or be in front of the wave, like explore in front of it, right? Be be thinking about what's next beyond AI, right? And thinking about how the world evolves beyond AI. Just don't be in the wave drowning, because there is a big wave coming and it will drown those people that are not either surfing it or in front of it. And so it is something that we all have to pay a lot of attention to as chief digital officers, and the way that the world evolves. I mean, one of the things that I'll leave you with, Peter, is that I used to remember back when I was at Ford Motor Company, and we chatted before, like everybody, all the leaders in an organization used to be measured around how big their organization were. Oh, you're running a 5,000 person organization, 10,000, 25,000, right? And my belief now is that the best leaders in the world should be measured based upon how small of an organization they can lead that actually produces the most value leveraging the tool sets of AI and intelligent data and things of that nature, right? That's going to be the future of the world, right? Because now you're hearing about startups that are creating, 100 million or $1 billion in valuation just with a few people, 10, 15, 20 people, and there's no reason that large corporations can't do the same things. If you wire your harnesses and systems using AI, tools like Palantir or Microsoft Foundry or Google's Agentic framework or AWS Bedrock, you can begin to build out a platform that allows you to not need the number of people that you have historically had, because a lot of them were doing manual tasks. And so I think that's like, the big aha moment for me in the last 12 months is like, the organization of the future is coming quickly, and it's going to be a heck of a lot smaller than the organization of today.
Well, the powerful words, certainly, Vijay, across a very powerful conversation, more generally speaking. I, as always, so appreciate the great insights you provided throughout this conversation, giving us access to where you're taking JCI, but also where you see the future as well. It's very exciting indeed. Thank you so much, Vijay.
Thanks so much, Peter. It's always a pleasure being on this podcast.
Thank you.